My name is Bob Famiglio, K3RF, K3 radio frequency. I've been a member of the league since early 1967. I was licensed in January of 67. I blame amateur radio for the success I've enjoyed in life. That's why I do what I do. I'm a volunteer counsel since the beginning of the program, 1985. So I'm older than I look, perhaps. But what I'm going to do today is tell you what the ARRL Legal Defense Committee can do for you. Now, I got a question for you. How many of you know that there's a Legal Defense Committee? Good. That is more than I expected, and that's a good thing. Legal Defense Committee, and I'm going to tell you what this is all about. And I am chairman this year of this committee. I've been on it for a few years. I was vice director of Atlantic Division. I'm now director, as you heard. It's my first full term of 3 years, starting in last January. I'm chairman of this committee. We met today for the first time as me being chairman right here at the Hamvention. They're all lawyers on that board. And I find a lot of people, a lot of members don't know what it does, except defend somebody, I suggest. That would be a good guess, right? So let me tell you what guidelines we have and when you should perhaps think about calling us if you have a legal issue, typically dealing with antennas, but I have expanded. I think we should expand from that, and I'll explain that in a little bit. By the way, if my audio fades because I don't have much of a side tone, raise your hand in the back, and I will know why you're raising your hand. I'll talk louder. Turn up the compression. I can't really judge that I'm shouting at you or not. So we have guidelines, as you can imagine. Those guidelines are on the website somewhere. But you can find them, or I can send them to you if you send me an email. But expenditures, and this is something you'd probably guess, expenditures have to be in support of, can be in support, they have been in the past, in support of different situations, most relating to antenna ordinances, which is what you would expect in a variety of communities. What that means is that typically ordinances that we believe were contrary to what our understanding of the FCC ruling in 1985, PRB1, if the definitions are different than what we think the law provides, we might fund some of those cases. Now, there are guidelines. We can't pay for all of it. Lawyers are just too damn expensive, and we just can't use up the members' money spending the kind of money that for major cases that are required. But we can help. And as I said on this slide, the fund that we have specifically allocated for the Legal Defense Committee comes from you folks. Thank you. There's a separate fund when you have been solicited with postcards or however we're trying to get extra funds this year, or whenever we do it. You'll see, please donate to the Legal Defense Fund, Spectrum Defense, whatever other program we have going. And as we talked about already, we have criteria, rules, and procedures for spending your favorite dollars, because this is really your money. Who in here is an ARRL member? I didn't ask that. That's like everybody. Well, thank you. That is, with one or two exceptions, everybody. These are your favorite dollars. So I want you to know what we do with it or what we plan to do with it. First of all, these things on here, I don't know if you can see it on the monitor. This is just sort of an outline. Naturally, the activities we can fund may have to do with antenna height and placement. And traditionally, that's the one that we have been doing for many years. We've been going after that. This is one you may not be aware of. We're also charged with funding matters that are interference allegedly caused by amateur radio operations to non-amateur radio users and services. We used to call it back in the day when my hair was black, TVI. Most of you remember how everything, especially if you lived in a town with Channel 2 or Channel 3, and especially like me when I was a kid, 13, running 6-meter AM when I got my technician up from novice, a general soon after, I used to interfere with everybody. And I had a Miko TX62. It wasn't a bad radio. It didn't really have any junk coming out of it, but every TV front end, the rest of that story. Thank God for cable. By the way, interference received by amateur radio operations from non-amateur radio sources. And we might also include that to mean potential interference. How many here know what I mean when I say BPL? All right, good. broadcast over power lines. What a wonderful idea. That's right. I'm sorry. Thank you. Broadband over power lines, which sometimes would be broadcast too, the digital broadcast. But yes, broadband over power line was the worst idea known to man because they're using single wire, really, to put a lot of RF in and hope that a few miles away some will come out at frequencies. And most of that energy, as you folks know, probably, radiated all over the place. We were in real trouble. And I could tell you, this is back in the early 2000s, was it? It was a while back. I lost sleep over that because I knew exactly what was going to happen. And many of you did too. And the nonsense was going on. Well, I'm here to tell you that this kind of activity by your league prevented that. We lost in district court. We appealed it. The circuit court spent hundreds of thousands of your favorite dollars. It's a lot of money, but it worked. And it really was important that we did that. People don't like that this stuff costs that kind of money. But I'm here to tell you, those of you that have had RFI issues in which it blanketed the whole HF and some VHF spectrum at 20/9, that's the world we are going to live with. It was more important, apparently, politically, to get cheap internet connections to the masses through your power wires going through your neighborhood than to worry about amateur radio. We had some allies. We had the military, and the Boeing aircraft thought it was a bad idea because of HF radio and all that kind of stuff. We also look at RF safety, structural things, environmental, other matters found by the committee. I'm chairman of the committee. We've got about 6 lawyers on there. Found by the committee to involve and potentially impact hams. That's what we do with your money. Now, funding is limited to activities predicted to provide assistance significantly useful to others. And what that really means is that we can't put money in something that's just going to benefit you but nobody else. That just wouldn't be fair. We couldn't do it. We'd run out of money in about 2 months. We're doing that. We will pick cases that look like if we win this one, this is true all over the legal field. When you have precedents, you pick a good case and say, this needs to be decided. We're going to put some resources. The facts are good. That's very important. There's no bad witnesses that are going to show up and really kill us. You have something to push and make some precedent. So here's in descending order, the kinds of things that your committee will fund. First, we like appellate-level cases on a national scope. I was involved in one in the Third Circuit. Went for 3 years up through the zoning board of some significant township in the greater Philadelphia suburbs where I live. And we had 5 nights of trial. I had 110 trial exhibits, and we had 500 pages of transcript. This is at the zoning level. And we appealed it to the federal court, who didn't like us very much. And then we thought that was wrong. We appealed it one more time to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, who gave us a decision that even the legal review of the Pittsburgh Law School, I forget which one, but University of Pitt wrote an article on it and said nobody can understand this decision. I thought it was just me, so I felt better. And we transferred the case, as procedure allowed us to do, to the state court, because we had state court issues. When you sue, you throw everything in, count 1, count 2, count 3, and whatever else you can think of and allege without breaking a smile. The lawyers know what I mean by that. And we did that, and it went to state court for Third Circuit. Took a couple years, and we transferred it to state court because we still had state court claims, and that went to the trial level. And they threw that out before trial, then went to the next appellate level, and then we went to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, and they said, no, but thanks for asking. So those are the kinds of cases that can be significant. When they're way up at top, they will affect all of you in that general area. Appellate level cases of statewide scope. Trial level cases are important, but you can win or lose a trial level case, and it's not precedent necessarily. It's persuasive, if you know what I mean by that. But well, of course you do, but it's from a legal point of view, I mean. And initiatives involving laws, bylaws, regulations which impact ham radio operators deploy effective antennas. That's kind of a catch-all. Did I skip something? No. Funding limitations, you should know this, not more than $10,000 per activity, so as to maximize the number that can be funded. We don't want to spend all of your money on one case unless it's something like BPL. the stuff that kept you up at night, I'll bet, too, if you were paying attention back then. I think some of you were. But $10,000 per activity, and limited to the amount of legal research and resource fund. In special situations, we can override that, but we have to be careful. It can be waived by the executive committee of the ARRL. It's somebody above my pay grade. And by the way, we don't get paid. I wanted to spell that. Directors don't. Somebody told me today he thought we did. And as volunteer counsel, we don't get paid either. Now, for a particular antenna installation, you're denied a tower or the things that Fred told you about. And by the way, I handled a local matter in which this WCF that he was talking about is starting to become a real pain in the you-know-what. It's really becoming an issue. And I use some of the arguments he has. In Pennsylvania, we also had an overriding law that threw them for a loop, but some of the states don't have stuff like that. And PRB1 just is a paper tiger. I'll talk about that in a minute if time permits. But the case must have substantial merits on the facts. You know, if you want to put a 200-foot tower on a quarter-acre lot, I'm not sure we're going to talk to you at all. We're just going to ask you to reconsider. And if you were able to pull it off somehow, I'm going to invite you to all my parties. That's just not going to work. It's not reasonable to do that. If you live on a small lot, you know, you can have maybe a 65-foot tower. There are people that want higher towers, and some of them are justified if you have 5 acres. A lot of you do. You know, some of you live out way out, you know, in the rural areas that I yearn to be. Must have a significant issue of law. We talked about that in your legal defense committee today. We had our first meeting of the year from 10 to 11:30. And we talked about what that really means, or it can be likely to be a persuasive example which other courts or boards are likely to follow. We can have initiatives involving bylaws, regulations, matters that have potential. We can do other things for you. Activities must maximize leverage, highlight, well, we already talked about this, high likelihood of success, high value to amateur radio, and where an unfavorable result would impact all of you if you live in that region of the country. And this is important. We have to have financial participation by the amateurs. We're not a charity of sorts. We assist on things that can affect you, not just the ham who has an issue. It has to be supported by that ham or by the local community. And we've seen that. People step up and say, well, if the ARRL is going to cough up a few bucks, maybe we will too. And they have to be informed. What does this mean? Why are we doing it? Does it go to work? And for bylaws and things, zoning regulations must be a well-developed effort. We're not going to step in and be, you know, your public assistance law firm. Yeah, not to exceed 10,000. We can do other things, decisions on a case-by-case basis. If you have something, a legal problem as a ham radio operator that is not covered by some of the things I just talked about, we can decide on a case-by-case basis whether what we do with that matter will affect all of you. And if it doesn't, we're not likely to look at it too kindly. We'll think about it, and it has to be by a decision of 2/3 of the majority of the committee. The committee is made up of 2 directors, 1 or more vice director, an experienced attorney, not a member of the league. We have one of those from Western Pennsylvania, and league counsel, David Siddell, K3ZJ, who I met with today as well at this meeting. So I'm going to wrap this up so we have time for some questions. I think the greatest threat that we have as radio amateurs, I used to think it was antenna rights. This is an older slide. It's actually spectrum threats. I won't talk about those, but when I give a talk as director, some of you from the Atlantic may have heard this. The 3 things that keep me up at night now is spectrum protection, spectrum threats is what keeps me up, antenna rights, and RFI. If you have spectrum, you can worry about all the other things. If you have no spectrum, and we're headed with some threats coming down the road, then it doesn't matter whether you have antennas or there's any RFI because you don't have any spectrum. And if you have good spectrum, and we do, you have no antenna rights, you can't use them very well. And then, of course, RFI. If you have the first two, and I do a lot of RFI cases. I work with FCC Laura Smith on helping people helping hams formulate RFI complaints. Power wires are the big ones. Imported equipment, pronounced China, that isn't compliant with Part 15. That happens all the time. Whether it's a $400 pool pump that radiates 20/9 noise 1,000 feet away all over the spectrum, or a power, electronic device of some sort. We're seeing a lot more of those. How many here, real quick, has had RFI issues, things that they have? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's not just me, see? Yeah, that's becoming a real threat. But as you see here, PRB1's a paper tiger. I think I have litigated. I have a slight difference with Fred Hopengarden, who has successfully litigated some of these. And we do have some decent law, but it's not a statute. It's an interpretation of a regulation. And under a Supreme Court decision a few years ago, they said that private individuals cannot file suit under what's called the Armstrong Supreme Court United States decision, cannot file suit to enforce a federal regulation. It has to be the FCC. That is becoming a significant worry of ours, and we're trying to fix that. Some state laws are more effective. HOAs we're working on. We'll entertain questions about that. I'm giving a talk tomorrow at the ARRL Members Forum. It's from 11 to 12:30, but my talk is, who knows, I'm sort of at the end, and I'm going to present the status report to you on what we're doing with the HOA bill. How many people here live in a homeowners association? Or it's more than I thought. Yeah, see, it's a problem. Some of you can't help it. There's little choice, or you got in a ham radio after you bought a place that has an HOA, and suddenly it's like, what? I get a lot of those calls as well. Not much we can do about those, by the way. There are some things, but with this bill, if it passes and we're making some progress, I'll report on tomorrow, because members want to know. If it goes through, you'll have a lot better time trying to operate. Because without antennas, we can't enjoy our spectrum. And my closing shot, our community is all of you. I'm real big on this. The ARRL is a member-driven democracy in which the members shape policy, and you do that through the power of the ballot. I want you all to remember that. It's really important, more than you could know. We'll take questions. Any question is game. We got one here in the front. You want to give him a microphone, this gentleman? Looks like we got some time, so we're going to answer everybody's question. If we run out of time, we'll stay here. You can come up and talk to us. Sir.
Most people will know that I probably didn't need this, but we'll go with it. I'm running into a situation that is completely different to some extent. Call signs. I do software documentation, and if you're doing ham radio software, we have call signs. You have to enter call signs. And I'll enter, just come up with a random call sign, and twice now I've had to withdraw documentation because I got a contact from somebody. You use my call sign, which I just randomly selected, in your documentation, and you can't do that. That's my call sign. I have the right to it.
Are you kidding me? That's okay. Well, we'll talk to you afterwards. Part of my practice is intellectual property, including copyright, patent, trademark, all that kind of stuff. And I'll talk to you. That's a special problem. But don't leave, and I will give you my answer. Fair enough? Okay. Don't leave. Next, this gentleman here has been waiting. Okay. Yeah, okay. Sir. Push to talk.
Hello.
Works.
Okay, now, had to let a lawyer do it. I live in a retirement community, which looks a lot like an HOA, but it's not, because I don't own anything. I'm trying to put up an antenna, and it doesn't look like I'm going to succeed. Does anything you talked about apply to this private property type situation?
I'll answer that.
Yes, go ahead.
No. And the reason is you've signed a contract. You're a tenant under a lease. Those are the terms of your life.
Yeah. Now.
Oh, you have a lease. Of course you have a lease.
Yet.
And they get to decide what's in the lease. You get to decide whether it's to sign it or not sign it.
let me add.
Them's your choices.
Fred is right. Let me add some comments. Did you read your lease? It's probably 30 pages, but you need to find out or have a lawyer look at it for you that knows something about radio to tell you whether it specifically excludes something like a wire out the window. I'm willing to wager it probably does. You know, no clotheslines, no pink flamingos in the front yard, and I get that. Now, the HOA bill, I would say, Fred, what's your opinion if we pass what we've been pushing? Will that affect a lease? A lease?
No.
No. Okay, so that's not going to help.
It's not.
But-
The reason is the definitions clause.
Yeah.
The definitions clause in the ARRL HOA bill does not talk about
Leases.
leases and tenants. What?
Right. Right. Look at your lease. Okay. Look at your lease. Next question.
Okay, mine is sort of like theirs. I live in we don't have an HOA, but when I called the city and I talked to them, they told me what I had to do was I could put up a 30-foot tower where I could go 10 feet above my roof. Now, I can't put a tower in the front. My backyard is 22 feet lower than my front yard.
Right.
Is it aggregated off my front yard or my backyard for that light height?
Yeah, you have to look at the
Wrong
zoning
question.
code. Yeah.
Because it's
Right.
what they've told you is a firm fixed maximum height. That's what's illegal. Whether the front yard or the backyard is higher or lower is irrelevant. We're hurrying because we haven't only until 5.
Just two quick questions. Is PRB one that prevents local governments from prohibiting antennas but lets them, quote, regulate them? Am I understanding that correctly? And the second,
As long as it reasonably accommodates amateur radio.
okay, and then good luck with that. That's why you're busy. And then the second question is, what are the chances of passing the HOA bill?
It won't happen this week.
Fred's on that committee. I am not, although they consult with me because that
Yeah,
committee's kind of filled
I
up.
spent a lot of time in Washington on this on behalf of the league, and the answer is that the wheels grind slowly in Washington, D.C. You have the best government that money can buy.
Right. We are working hard and spending some of your money trying to get that through, and I happen to think in a couple years it'll bear some fruit. It's a real good bill, unlike some of the older bills.
So this is more of a testimony of the time the league helped me with a problem. So I had an issue with the Maricopa County Planning and Zoning, one of your CEOs. Oh, okay, yep. So you know exactly what I'm talking about then. The local attorney that the ARRL set me up with happened to have interactions over a privacy wall on his property with the same officer, and, well, he just told me to stop talking to her. I won't say exactly how he told me not why I should not stop talking to her, but ultimately in the end, it got resolved. But I had the help from the league that got that done. So the legal group is definitely very helpful.
Let me give you some advice, and Fred, you chime in. What you need to do is before you start talking with local government, see if you can talk with a volunteer counsel, a lawyer that's either land use, well, they don't always know about antennas. That's kind of a specialty, because when you start a discussion, when you start and file your own application, everything you file can and will be used against you. You can't change it later. That's a really good point.
Okay, I want to tell you something about Maricopa County, and I hope you will take something away here. It turns out that if you are in the city, you are screwed. If you're in the county, you're okay. Oh, then you managed to be in a place. Okay, yours is a unique geographical situation. But the bottom line is, what I wanted to convey to Arizona people is there are 28 states that have, in effect, a mini PRB1 statute to help radio hams. Arizona is one that does not. And I have actually drafted in the preferred Arizona format a statute which would incorporate PRB1 into Arizona law, and the hams of Arizona have done nothing to promote it. It's your fault. You personally.
But please,
you have a question?
Please,
Yeah,
please
I'll
make
get this
sure,
question.
He's going to come back to it. Please make sure you do planning in advance. Everybody that calls me, and Fred may have a similar experience, has really mucked up something. When they've gone to a zoning hearing, and they said, well, I'm just going to appeal. Now I'm going to get a lawyer. Sometimes, most of the time, I would argue it's too late because I can't change the record. I can't change what you said. I can't change what you filed. And I can't change what you failed to put in your permit application or go to a zoning hearing board for a so-called variance, which you're not really entitled to. Sir.
Yes, I have a spectrum question. Curious what's going to happen to 3.4 gig. I represent the Rochester region, which has a lot of microwave operators,
Yes,
and
you
I'm
do.
curious about that.
Well, as you know, I suspect it's a done deal with respect to most of that spectrum, right? We have spent your money well on trying to defend that. And we had other allies too. Now there is one segment that hasn't been changed yet. Am I right on that? The answer is I don't know. We're fighting like hell to give you a sliver of that band because I think it's important. I think VHF, UHF, SHF is where we're going to be in the future. Look at the ICOM 905, a surprising radio. Never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. Next question. Does that answer your question, by the way? We're working on it. Next question.
Bob, take a second and congratulations for saving Pennsylvania hams and anybody who drives through Pennsylvania. You can use your radio. Tell us in 60 seconds how you did it because other people are going to face this if they haven't already.
Yeah, those of you that don't know, Pennsylvania, many of you have cell phone laws in your states. We had one in Pennsylvania 3 years ago. It promised to make ham radio illegal while you're driving. Yet you can listen, but you can't have a mic in your hand or a radio. And I negotiated 3 years ago with the bill sponsor, Senator Brown, to have a ham radio exemption. And it said just that. We could get away with murder. They didn't catch the language, but they approved it. Well, a month or two ago in Pennsylvania, I get a call from a ham friend, and I was watching that bill. It had disappeared. It became what we call a zombie bill, and that's a real term they use. It came back from the dead 3 years and went to a vote, but I looked at it, and it had dropped out the ham radio exemption. This is a panic because it really meant business. Some representative in Philadelphia proper thought that hams should just hang up and drive, that we're no better drivers than anybody else. One could argue that. I did not. So, long story short, those of you in the Atlantic Division that got my email, anybody here from Atlantic? A couple of you, I sent out an email, a flare in the night, and I said, Paul Revere just ran through and says, we're in trouble. The way I did it, a wing and a prayer. I called everybody. I sent formal letters on my letterhead. That hell no, and here's why. We were nice about it, and I had talking points I sent to people and all that kind of stuff. I'll tell you more about it later, but we got another question. Thank you.
So just a quick question. So I live in Highland Park, Illinois. We had an informal meeting with some of the mayor and a couple of people on the city council, and we were mostly there to discuss a different issue. But I brought up at the end of the meeting that, the rules in Highland Park are pretty restrictive compared to the surrounding communities. And the mayor said, well, why don't you give us some information about that and we'll look into it. So is this something that I should be speaking to you guys about or the committee?
Yes.
Yes. The reason is because we can help you do it right from the start. Because once you give them information, it's so hard to change. You can't. Like, why are you doing this? Didn't you give it to us to front? I'd rather you go in with your homework done. And it just makes sense. Have any other questions?
Thank you.
On the same vein as his, so if I want to start initiating this thing with the city that I live in, I'll get my homework done first, and if I say, well, this is what the current rules are, I can send that to you, and you guys can give me an opinion coming back.
We'll give you help with that, and we actually prefer that we solve a problem early rather than cost a lot of money that we can't win with anyway later. It kind of makes sense, and that's the case with any legal matter. No matter what you're doing, talk to somebody first that knows something about something. Make sure you're going down the right path because you can't backtrack. You can, but it's a mess.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. See you next year at Amateur Radio and the Law.